The crystal chandelier above the Warren family dining table cast sharp shadows across Imani Colbert's hands as she stood frozen in the hallway. Her fingers gripped the edge of the doorframe, knuckles turning ashen beneath her deep brown skin. Through the crack in the door, she could see her adoptive family gathered around the mahogany table, papers spread before them like accusations. "We're drowning, Thomas." Patricia Warren's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like glass. "The company is 6 months from bankruptcy." 6 months? After 3 generations of success, we'll be the ones who lose everything. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. She had known things were bad. The hushed phone calls, the arguments behind closed doors, the way Thomas Warren's face had grown gaunt and gray over the past year. But bankruptcy? The word seemed impossible for a family that had always worn their wealth like armor. "The Pierce meeting is our last shot." Bradley Warren, their biological son, leaned back in his chair. At 32, he had his mother's sharp features and his father's sense of entitlement. "Brandon Pierce has more money than God. One investment from him could save everything. He's also notoriously particular about who he works with." Thomas Warren rubbed his temples. "Every proposal we've sent has been rejected. He won't even take our calls anymore." Silence fell over the room. Imani knew she should walk away, go back to her small room in the East Wing, pretend she had heard nothing. But her feet refused to move. Something about the tension in the air told her this conversation was about to turn dangerous. "What if we sweeten the deal?" Patricia's voice had changed, taken on a calculating edge that made Imani's stomach turn. "Offered him something unexpected? What are you suggesting?" Thomas asked. "Imani." The name hung in the air like poison. Imani's breath caught in her throat. "What about her?" Bradley asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Patricia laughed, a cold sound that held no humor. "Think about it. Brandon Pierce has everything: money, power, success. But he's been alone since his wife died 3 years ago. What if we offered him companionship? As part of the business package?" "You can't be serious." Thomas's voice held more disbelief than outrage. "You want to offer our daughter?" "Adopted daughter," Patricia corrected sharply. "And I'm not talking about anything permanent or illegal. Just part of the arrangement. We took her in, gave her a home, education, everything. She owes us. And honestly, what else is she good for? She's 26 with a liberal arts degree and no real prospects. At least this way she'd be useful." Imani felt bile rise in her throat. Her vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to keep listening. "That's insane." Bradley's protest was weak, already crumbling. "You can't just offer a person." "We wouldn't phrase it like that," Patricia continued, her voice gaining confidence as she warmed to her plan. "We'd present it as a joke at first. You know, we're so desperate we'd throw in our daughter too. Laugh it off. But plant the seed. Brandon Pierce is a businessman. If he sees value in the package deal, he'll pursue it himself. Then it's his idea, not ours." "And if he doesn't bite?" Thomas asked. Imani noticed he wasn't refusing the plan outright. He was just considering logistics. "Then we've lost nothing. We play it off as a joke in poor taste and move on." "But if he does?" Patricia paused meaningfully. "Imani is beautiful. She's educated enough to hold a conversation. And she's been raised with enough etiquette to fit into his world. From a purely strategic standpoint, she's an asset we haven't utilized." "This is crazy." But Bradley's voice held more curiosity than conviction now. "You really think he'd go for it?" "Men are predictable," Patricia said coldly. "Especially lonely ones with too much money. They like to play hero. We present Imani as part of the deal, he feels like he's rescuing her from us, everyone wins." "Except Imani," Thomas said quietly. Patricia's laugh was brittle. "Please. We've given her 20 years of the best life she could have asked for. She was going into the foster system when we adopted her. Some group home or worse. We saved her. She owes us this. And honestly, marrying a billionaire? Most women would kill for that opportunity. She should be grateful." Imani's legs finally unlocked. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to muffle any sound. Her entire body shook as the reality crashed over her like ice water. They were planning to trade her. Like property. Like an object to be used in a business transaction. 20 years. She had spent 20 years in this house trying to earn their love. Trying to be good enough, smart enough, quiet enough. She had watched them lavish attention on Bradley, had accepted the smaller bedroom, the hand-me-down clothes before they finally bought her new ones, the subtle ways they reminded her she wasn't really family. And she had told herself it didn't matter. That they had given her a home when no one else wanted her, that she should be grateful. But they had never wanted her at all. She had always been an acquisition. Something to make them look good, to show how charitable and progressive they were. And now that they needed something, they were ready to trade her away without a second thought. So we're agreed? Patricia's voice drifted from the dining room. The Pierce dinner is tomorrow night. We make the joke, see how he responds. I still think this is insane, Bradley muttered. You think filing for bankruptcy isn't insane? Patricia snapped. We do what we must. Family legacy comes first. Except Imani isn't really family, is that it? Thomas's question was quiet, resigned. Now you're understanding, Patricia said. Imani didn't wait to hear more. She turned and walked on shaking legs toward her room, each step feeling like wading through deep water. Inside her small bedroom, she closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. The room was neat and impersonal, like a hotel room. In 20 years, she had never been encouraged to really decorate it. Keep it tasteful, Patricia had always said. Remember, this isn't really your house. You're a guest who we've been kind enough to let stay. Imani had tried so hard to believe that wasn't true. That somewhere, buried beneath the cold politeness and the subtle reminders of her place, they actually cared about her. But tonight had stripped away that last desperate hope. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Tomorrow night, they would sit around a table with Brandon Pierce, the man who could save their company. And they would offer her up like a prize in a business deal. They would laugh about it, make it seem like a joke, but mean every word. And if he accepted, they would hand her over without hesitation. What made it worse was the certainty that they saw nothing wrong with this. In their minds, they had done her a favor by adopting her. She owed them. Her life, her choices, her body, it was all debt to be repaid. Imani pressed her face against her knees and let the tears come. Silent, hot tears that soaked into the green cotton of her dress. She had nowhere to go, no family to run to, no safety net. The Warrens had made sure of that over the years, subtly isolating her from forming deep friendships, discouraging her from pursuing careers that might take her far from home. She was trapped. And tomorrow night, the door of her cage was going to open, not to freedom but to a different kind of prison. The worst part, the part that made her feel sick and ashamed, was a tiny voice in the back of her mind asking if maybe this was her only way out. If being traded to a billionaire, even as part of a joke, might somehow be better than staying with the family who saw her as nothing more than a commodity. She hated herself for even thinking it. But as she sat on the floor of her impersonal room, listening to the Warrens continue their planning in the dining room below, Imani couldn't help but wonder if there was any situation in this world where she would ever be seen as more than a transaction. Tomorrow she would have her answer. What would you do if your family offered you as a joke in a business deal? Would you run, or would you stay and face the humiliation? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to see how Imani handles this impossible situation. Your support means everything. The next evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Imani stood in front of her closet mirror, adjusting the simple blue dress Patricia had laid out for her. Not too fancy, Patricia had said. We don't want to look like we're trying too hard. The irony wasn't lost on Imani. She had barely slept, spending the night alternating between fury and despair. Part of her wanted to run, to pack a bag and disappear before dinner. But where would she go? Her bank account held maybe $3,000, saved from years of birthday gifts and the small allowance the Warrens gave her. That would last perhaps 2 months in a cheap apartment, and then what? No. Running wasn't an option. At least not yet. Downstairs, she could hear the bustle of preparation. The Warrens had hired extra staff for the evening, wanting everything to be perfect. The best china, the best wine, the best version of themselves. And Imani, apparently, dressed in blue to blend into the background until the moment they decided to put her on display. Imani. Patricia's voice called up the stairs. Our guest will be here in 10 minutes. Come down. Imani took a deep breath and descended the stairs, each step feeling like walking toward an execution. In the grand foyer, the Warren family waited. Thomas in his best suit, looking ill at ease. Bradley in designer casual wear, checking his phone. And Patricia, wearing a red dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Remember? Patricia said, looking directly at Imani. You're pleasant but not memorable. Speak when spoken to. Smile. Don't embarrass us. I understand, Imani said quietly. Her stomach churned. The doorbell rang. One of the hired staff moved to answer it, and Imani's heart began to race. This was it. The moment her life became part of a business transaction. Brandon Pierce entered the foyer, and Imani's first thought was that he didn't look like she expected. She had pictured someone older, perhaps cold and calculating. Instead, the man who stepped through the door was maybe late 30s, tall and lean in a well-cut charcoal suit. His skin was a warm brown, lighter than hers, his features suggesting mixed heritage. He had kind eyes, deep brown and observant, and when he smiled at the greeting party, the smile actually reached those eyes. "Mr. Pierce, welcome." Thomas stepped forward, hand extended. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Thank you for the invitation," Brandon said. His voice was deep, measured. "Your home is beautiful." The pleasantries continued as they moved into the dining room. Imani hung back as was expected of her, but she couldn't help stealing glances at Brandon Pierce. There was something about him that didn't fit the image of a ruthless billionaire. The way he thanked each staff member who served them, the genuine interest in his questions about the house's history, the absence of the arrogant swagger she had expected. Dinner began with uncomfortable small talk. The Warrens were trying too hard, laughing too loud at comments that weren't funny, pushing their business agenda too eagerly. Imani could see Brandon's polite mask beginning to strain. Then Patricia made her move. "We truly appreciate you considering our proposal," she said, refilling Brandon's wine glass. "We're prepared to offer very favorable terms. In fact, we're so eager to work with you, we'd practically throw in everything we have. Including." She laughed, a practiced sound, "our daughter here." The words landed like stones in still water. Silence rippled outward. Imani felt her face burn with humiliation. She kept her eyes on her plate, unable to look up. "I'm sorry?" Brandon's voice had changed, gone flat and hard. "What did you just say?" "Oh, it's just a joke," Thomas jumped in, his laugh nervous. "You know how it is. We're just so desperate to make this work. Pat has a terrible sense of humor." "Does she?" Brandon's tone suggested he didn't find it funny at all. Of course," Patricia backtracked, but Imani could hear the calculation in her voice. She was watching Brandon's reaction, measuring it. "Though, between us, Imani is quite accomplished. Any man would be lucky to have her in their life." "Is that so?" Brandon set down his wine glass carefully. His eyes moved to Imani for the first time, really looked at her. Colbert," Imani said softly, finally meeting his gaze. "Imani Colbert." Something passed between them in that moment. Brandon's eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to see past the humiliation and forced smiles. He saw the trapped animal beneath. "Miss Colbert, would you mind showing me the garden I saw when I arrived? I'd love to see it before it gets too dark." The request surprised everyone. Patricia's smile faltered. Thomas exchanged a confused glance with Bradley. "Oh, that's not necessary," Patricia began. "We should discuss business." "I'd like to see the garden," Brandon repeated, his voice polite but firm. He stood and looked at Imani. "If you don't mind?" Imani stood on shaking legs. "Of course." They walked out to the garden in silence, leaving the stunned Warren family behind. Once outside, away from the windows where they could be overheard, Brandon stopped and turned to face her. "Are you all right?" he asked simply. The question, asked with genuine concern by a complete stranger, almost broke her. Imani blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Brandon's voice was gentle. "And you shouldn't have to be. What they just did in there was cruel." "It's nothing I'm not used to," Imani said, then immediately regretted the admission. Brandon was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "How long have you lived with them?" 20 years. They adopted me when I was 6. "And they treat you like this regularly?" Imani didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Brandon nodded slowly as if making a decision. "Miss Colbert, I'm going to make you an unusual offer. You can refuse and I'll respect that decision completely. But I want you to hear me out." Imani's heart raced. "I'm listening." "I own a technology company among other businesses. I need a personal assistant, someone smart, capable, and trustworthy. The position comes with a salary of $200,000 a year, full benefits, housing in a guest house on my estate, and a company car. The contract would be for 1 year, renewable if both parties agree. At the end of that year, you'd have enough saved to start any life you wanted, completely independent." Imani stared at him. "Why would you offer me that?" "Because what they did in there was wrong. Because I can afford to help and I choose to. And because..." He paused, "because I know what it's like to feel trapped. I may have money but I understand pain. My wife died 3 years ago. For a long time after, I felt like I was drowning. I understand that look in your eyes." "I don't want charity," Imani said, her pride stinging. "It's not charity. I genuinely need an assistant. My last one retired 6 months ago and I've been drowning in work. You'd be earning every penny. But more than that, this would give you options. Freedom. A chance to figure out what you want from life without being dependent on people who don't value you. Imani's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch. But when she looked into Brandon Pierce's eyes, she saw only sincerity. What would I have to do? She asked carefully. Manage my schedule, handle correspondence, coordinate meetings, some travel arrangement. Standard assistant duties. I work long hours, but I respect work-life balance. You'd have your own space, your own life. No strings attached beyond the professional relationship. And the Warrens? I'll still invest in their company. But you'll have nothing to do with that deal. This offer is separate, just between us. If you accept, I'll have my lawyers draw up a contract tonight. You could start immediately. Imani felt tears threatening again. This was her way out. A real way out. And all she had to do was say yes. But something held her back. Years of being told she was worthless, that she owed the Warrens everything, that she should be grateful for scraps. How could she just accept such generosity? As if reading her thoughts, Brandon spoke again. Imani, may I call you Imani? She nodded. Imani, you don't owe them anything. You were a child. They chose to adopt you, and with that choice came responsibilities they clearly didn't honor. Whatever they gave you, it was their legal and moral obligation. You don't owe them your future. And accepting help when you need it isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Why are you doing this? Imani whispered. You don't even know me. Because I can, Brandon said simply. Because when I see someone who needs help and I have the means to provide it, I believe that's what I should do. And maybe... He paused, a sad smile crossing his face. Maybe because after 3 years of barely living, of just going through the motions, helping someone else makes me feel human again. Imani took a deep breath. Everything in her upbringing told her to refuse, to not be a burden, to stay in her place. But a new voice, stronger and clearer, told her this was survival. This was her chance. Yes, she said. I accept. Thank you. Brandon's smile was genuine and warm. Thank you. Now shall we go back inside? I have a business deal to finalize with your former family. The word former sent a thrill through Imani's chest. Former family. A new life. Freedom. They walked back into the house together, and Imani felt like a different person than the one who had left it. The Warrens were waiting anxiously in the dining room. Everything all right? Patricia asked, her eyes darting between them suspiciously. Perfect, Brandon said smoothly. I've reconsidered your proposal. I'll invest the full amount you're requesting. Have your lawyers contact mine tomorrow and we'll finalize the details. The Warrens' faces lit up with relief and joy. They began thanking him profusely, but Brandon held up a hand. There is one condition. Imani has agreed to come work for me as my personal assistant. She'll be leaving with me tonight. The room went silent. Tonight? Thomas said weakly. That's rather sudden, Patricia said, her voice sharp. Is it? Brandon's tone was mild but his eyes were steel. You offered her as part of the deal. I'm simply taking you up on that offer, though in a much more ethical and legal way. She'll be my employee, well compensated and well treated. Unless you have objections? In which case, I can reconsider the investment. The threat hung in the air. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The Warrens needed this deal. They needed it desperately. And Brandon Pierce had just made it clear that Imani's freedom was part of the package. No, Thomas finally said, defeat in his voice. No objections. Wonderful. Brandon turned to Imani. If you'd like to pack your things, I'll wait. Imani nodded, not trusting her voice. She climbed the stairs to her room one last time, packed her meager belongings into 2 suitcases, and looked around the space that had been her prison for 20 years. She felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Only a bubbling sense of freedom. When she came back downstairs, Brandon was waiting by the door. The Warrens stood in awkward silence, not even pretending to be sad about her leaving. Goodbye, Imani said to them. It was all she could manage. Patricia nodded curtly. Thomas looked away. Bradley was back on his phone. Imani walked out the door and didn't look back. In the driveway, a sleek black car waited. Brandon's driver took her suitcases and loaded them into the trunk. Ready? Brandon asked. Imani looked back at the house one more time, then at the man who had just changed her entire life. Yes, she said. I'm ready. As the car pulled away from the Warren estate, Imani watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. She was leaving behind 2 decades of pain, of feeling unwanted and used. and driving toward something new, something unknown. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, Imani Colbert felt hope. The Pierce estate was nothing like the Warren house. Where the Warrens favored cold marble and sharp angles, Brandon's home was warm and lived in. The main house was substantial but not showy, built of honey-colored stone with large windows that seemed to invite natural light. Gardens surrounded the property, professionally maintained but with a wild edge that suggested someone actually cared about beauty, not just appearances. The car pulled up to a smaller building set apart from the main house, connected by a stone path lined with solar lights. "This is the guest house," Brandon explained as they stepped out. "It's yours for as long as you work for me. 3 bedrooms, full kitchen, living space. Completely private. I'll only come over if invited or if there's an emergency." Imani followed him inside and caught her breath. The space was beautiful. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture in shades of green and cream, large windows overlooking the garden. It felt like a real home, not a showpiece. "The main bedroom is through there," Brandon pointed. "I had my housekeeper stock the kitchen with basics, but we can go shopping tomorrow if there's anything specific you need. Here's a key, the code for the security system, and this." He handed her a smartphone, still in its box. "It's linked to my business accounts and has all the contact information you'll need. Your personal accounts can stay separate if you prefer." Imani turned the phone over in her hands, overwhelmed. "This is too much." "It's tools for your job," Brandon corrected gently. "Imani, I need you to understand something. You're not a charity case. You're my employee. I have high standards and I'm going to expect you to meet them. This isn't a free ride. It's an opportunity, but you'll have to work for it." The words, oddly, were comforting. Imani had been afraid this was all pity. The idea that she would have to earn her place, that she had value to offer, made it feel real. "I understand," she said. "Good. Now it's late. Get settled tonight. Tomorrow morning, come to the main house at 8. We'll go over your duties and get started. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will give you the tour." "Oh, and Imani?" She looked up at him. "Welcome home." After Brandon left, Imani stood in the middle of her new living room, surrounded by her meager suitcases, and finally let herself break down. She sank onto the couch and sobbed, great heaving cries that came from somewhere deep inside. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were relief. The overwhelming emotion of realizing she was finally, truly safe. She cried until she had no tears left, then wiped her face and began unpacking. Her clothes looked shabby and sparse in the large closet, her few personal items barely filling one shelf. But it was hers. This space, this chance, this life was hers. That night, Imani slept better than she had in years. The next morning she woke early, nervous energy flooding her system. She dressed carefully in one of her nicer outfits, black slacks and a cream blouse, then walked the stone path to the main house. Mrs. Chin met her at the door. The woman was in her 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "You must be Imani." "I'm Mrs. Chin, I manage the household. Mr. Pierce asked me to show you around before you start." The main house was impressive but comfortable. Unlike the Warren home, which felt like a museum, Brandon's house showed signs of life. Books stacked on tables, comfortable throws on chairs, photos on the walls. Photos of a beautiful woman with dark hair and a warm smile, sometimes alone, sometimes with Brandon. His late wife, Imani realized. "Mr. Pierce works from home most days," Mrs. Chin explained as they walked. "His office is on the 2nd floor. You'll have a desk there as well. He prefers not to go into the corporate headquarters unless necessary, too many distractions." She showed Imani the office, a large room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, 2 desks facing each other, and windows overlooking the garden. One desk was clearly Brandon's, organized chaos with files and papers. The other was pristine, waiting for Imani. "He's in a conference call right now," Mrs. Chin said. "Should be done in about 20 minutes. Would you like coffee while you wait?" "Please," Imani said. "And Mrs. Chin? Thank you for being so welcoming." The older woman's face softened. "Mr. Pierce is a good man. He's been through a lot these past few years. It's nice to see him engaging with life again. Whatever arrangement you two have worked out, I'm glad you're here." Imani spent the waiting time examining the office, trying to get a sense of how Brandon worked. His desk held 3 computer monitors, various electronic devices, and surprisingly, several framed photos. The woman from downstairs appeared in most of them. His wife. She had been beautiful, but more than that, the photos captured a sense of joy in life that made Imani's chest ache. How devastating it must have been to lose that. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Brandon's voice startled her. He entered carrying his own coffee mug, dressed more casually today in dark slacks and a green button-down. Morning conference calls are a necessary evil. How did you sleep? Very well, thank you. The guest house is perfect. Good. Ready to jump in? The next several hours passed in a blur. Brandon walked Imani through his various businesses, his schedule management system, his preferences for correspondence, and the dozens of small details that kept his empire running. He was patient but thorough, and Imani found herself taking furious notes. I know it's a lot, Brandon said around noon. We'll take it step by step. You'll learn as we go. They worked through lunch, Mrs. Chin bringing them sandwiches that they ate at their desks. Imani watched how Brandon handled phone calls and video conferences, noting his style. He was direct but never rude, decisive but willing to listen, powerful but not cruel. It was a masterclass in leadership. Late in the afternoon, a man appeared in the doorway of the office. He was African American, about Brandon's age, with an easy smile and sharp eyes. So this is the new assistant everyone's talking about, he said. Imani, this is Jerome Mitchell, my CFO and best friend since college. Brandon introduced them. Jerome, this is Imani Colbert. Jerome crossed the room and shook Imani's hand warmly. Welcome to the madness. Fair warning, Brandon here is a workaholic who will run you into the ground if you let him. I pay you very well to not be run into the ground, Brandon said mildly. True. Jerome turned back to Imani. Seriously though, welcome. Brandon's been a mess without an assistant. We're all hoping you can bring some order back to the chaos. There was genuine warmth in Jerome's welcome, no suspicion or judgment. Just acceptance. It made something tight in Imani's chest loosen. They spent another hour going over systems and processes before Brandon finally called it a day. You did well, he said as Imani gathered her notes. Really well. I think this is going to work out nicely. I hope so, Imani said. And Brandon? Thank you. Not just for the job but for everything. For seeing me when no one else did. Brandon's expression softened. You're welcome. But Imani, you need to stop thanking me. You're earning your place here. This isn't charity. But they both knew it was more than that. Brandon had saved her, whether he wanted to call it that or not. And Imani was determined to prove worthy of that salvation. Over the next few weeks, Imani settled into her new life with a sense of wonder. She learned the rhythms of Brandon's schedule, the quirks of his businesses, the thousand small details that made everything run smoothly. She was good at it, she discovered. The organizational skills she had developed trying to stay invisible in the Warren house translated well to managing a billionaire's complex life. Brandon was an excellent boss, demanding but fair, quick to praise good work and patient with mistakes. He treated her like a person, not a servant. He asked about her opinions, valued her input, and slowly, Imani began to feel like she had real worth. One evening, about 3 weeks in, Brandon invited her to have dinner with him and Jerome in the main house. Jerome had brought his wife Tanya, a warm woman who immediately put Imani at ease. It's so nice to see Brandon engaging with people again, Tanya said as they ate. She wore a cheerful red blouse that suited her personality. After Michelle died, he just shut down. Threw himself into work and nothing else. Tanya? Jerome warned gently. No, she's right, Brandon said. He looked at Imani. I haven't been fully present in my own life for 3 years. I've been going through the motions. But having someone else to consider, someone to work with, it's been good for me. You've been good for me, Imani. The comment was casual, but something in the way he said it made Imani's heart skip. She looked down at her plate, afraid her face would betray the warmth flooding through her. Well, we're glad to have you here, Jerome said, smoothly changing the subject. And speaking of work, Brandon, we need to talk about the Hartman proposal. Business talk resumed, and Imani was grateful for the reprieve. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Brandon had called her presence in his life good. And sitting at this table, surrounded by kind people who treated her like family, Imani realized she felt the same way. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. And that terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. 6 weeks into her new life, Imani had almost managed to forget about the Warrens entirely. She was thriving in her role, learning more each day, and slowly beginning to believe this life was real and permanent. Brandon had even insisted she use the company card to buy herself a proper work wardrobe, and her closet now held clothes that actually fit and looked professional. She was working late one Thursday evening, finishing up some correspondence, when Mrs. Chin appeared in the office doorway looking troubled. Imani, there are people here to see you. They say they're your family. Imani's blood ran cold. The Warrens? Mrs. Chin nodded. They're quite insistent. Mr. Pierce is in a board meeting, or I would have asked him first. I wasn't sure what to do. Imani's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. Where are they? I left them in the front parlor. I didn't want them wandering the house. Thank you, Mrs. Chin. I'll handle it. Imani walked to the front parlor with her heart hammering. Through the doorway she could see them. Patricia, Thomas, and Bradley Warren, all three looking around the room with barely concealed envy. Imani, there you are, Patricia said when she entered. Her voice was sticky sweet, but her eyes were calculating. We've missed you terribly. You left so suddenly. What do you want? Imani kept her voice steady. That's no way to greet your family, Thomas chided. We came to see how you're settling in. This is quite the setup you've landed in. I'm working, Imani said. I have a job. That's all this is. Right, a job. Bradley smirked. He wore an expensive-looking maroon shirt, probably bought with Brandon's investment money. Personal assistant. That must be quite interesting work. The insinuation in his voice made Imani's skin crawl, but she refused to rise to the bait. Did you need something specific? I have work to finish. Patricia's false sweetness dropped away. Actually, yes. We do need something. Brandon's investments saved our company, which is wonderful. But we've identified some additional opportunities. Expansion possibilities that could really take us to the next level. We need more capital. So ask Brandon yourselves. I don't handle his investments. But you have his ear, Thomas said. You're with him every day. Surely you could mention these opportunities, help convince him to invest more. Imani stared at them in disbelief. You can't be serious. You want me to manipulate my boss into giving you more money? Don't be dramatic, Patricia snapped. We're not asking you to manipulate anyone. Just mention the opportunities. Plant seeds. That's all. After everything you did, everything you said, you have the nerve to come here and ask me for favors? We gave you everything, Patricia's voice rose. 20 years of our generosity. You owe us. I owe you nothing. The words felt powerful, liberating. You took me in because it made you look good. You treated me like an employee, not a daughter. And then you tried to trade me to save yourselves. I don't owe you anything. You ungrateful little. Patricia started forward, but Thomas caught her arm. Maybe we should discuss this more calmly, he said. There's nothing to discuss. Imani's voice was steel. I'm not helping you. Please leave. Now wait just a minute, Bradley said. You're living in luxury here because of us. If we hadn't made that deal with Brandon? Is there a problem? Brandon's voice cut through the room like ice. They all turned. Brandon stood in the doorway, still in his suit from his board meeting. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold as they swept over the Warrens. Mr. Pierce? Patricia's face lit up with false delight. We were just visiting Imani. I can see that. And from what I overheard, demanding that she pressure me for more investments. Brandon's voice was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Let me make something very clear. Imani is my employee. She has no influence over my business decisions, nor would I ever put her in that position. Your business arrangement is with me directly. If you have proposals, you go through the proper channels. Of course, we didn't mean to. Thomas started. I think you did. Brandon stepped fully into the room. I think you came here to exploit someone you've spent 20 years exploiting. That ends now. We're her family, Patricia protested. No, you're not. Family doesn't treat people the way you treated Imani. Family doesn't offer a child up as part of a business deal, even as a joke. Brandon's voice was cutting. I've been thinking about this situation a lot over the past few weeks. And I've made a decision. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This is a check. It will pay off every remaining debt your company has. Every mortgage, every loan, every credit line. You'll be completely solvent. The Warrens' eyes went wide with greed and disbelief. However, Brandon continued, accepting this check comes with conditions. You will sign legal documents relinquishing any parental rights or claims to Imani. You will sign agreements never to contact her again unless she initiates contact. You will have no legal, financial, or social claim on her life moving forward. That's blackmail, Patricia breathed. No, it's a business deal. The kind you claim to understand. Brandon's smile was sharp. You get financial freedom. Imani gets actual freedom. Everyone wins. Unless, of course, you value your claim on Imani more than you value solvency. The silence stretched. Imani watched the Warrens exchange glances, saw the calculation in their eyes. They were weighing the value of keeping her in their clutches against the value of complete financial security. It took them less than 30 seconds to decide. "We'll need to review the documents with our lawyer," Thomas said slowly. "Of course. I'll have everything sent over tomorrow. You'll have 1 week to decide." Brandon's tone was final. "Now I think you should leave. You're upsetting my assistant, and I have a very busy schedule tomorrow that I need her clear-headed for." The dismissal was clear. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Thomas was already moving toward the door. Bradley followed, throwing one last resentful look at Imani. At the doorway, Patricia turned back. "You'll regret this, Imani. Biting the hand that fed you." "The hand that fed me also tried to sell me," Imani said quietly. "I have no regrets." After they left, silence fell over the room. Imani stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Brandon had offered to pay off all the Warrens' debts. That had to be millions of dollars. Just to set her free. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why would you do that?" Brandon's expression softened. "Because I can afford it and you deserve to be free. Because what they did was wrong and I have the means to make it right. And because..." He paused. "Because in 6 weeks you've become important to me. Not as an employee, though you're excellent at that, but as a person I care about. I don't like seeing people I care about hurt." Imani felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I can't let you do this. It's too much. It's already done. The check is written. The documents are drawn up. All that's left is for them to decide what they value more, money or control over you. And we both know what they'll choose." He was right. The Warrens would take the money. They would sign away any claim to her without hesitation. And Imani would finally, truly be free. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know you say I shouldn't keep thanking you, but I don't know what else to say." Brandon crossed the room and for the first time, pulled her into a brief hug. It was warm and solid and safe. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep being who you are. That's enough." When he pulled back, Imani saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Something warm and complex that made her heart race. "Come on," Brandon said, breaking the moment. "It's late and we both need dinner. Mrs. Chin made her famous lasagna. We can eat and watch something mindless on TV. No more thinking about the Warrens tonight." They spent the evening in Brandon's comfortable media room, eating lasagna and watching old comedies. It felt natural and easy, like they'd been friends for years rather than weeks. When Imani finally returned to the guest house, she felt lighter than she had since the Warrens' arrival. True to Brandon's prediction, the Warrens signed the documents within 3 days. They took the money and walked away without a backward glance. Imani waited for the grief, the sense of loss, but it never came. Instead, she felt only relief. She was free. Truly, completely free. No more looking over her shoulder, no more fearing they would come back and try to claim her or control her. She was her own person for the first time in her life. And as she looked at Brandon across their shared office, watching him work with quiet intensity, Imani realized something else. She wasn't just free from the Warrens. She was free to choose what came next. And what she was beginning to want, what she was beginning to hope for, was something she never thought she deserved. A real home. A real family. Maybe even real love. It was terrifying and thrilling and entirely new. But as Imani had learned over the past 2 months, sometimes the scariest things were the ones most worth pursuing. Spring arrived at the Pierce estate with an explosion of color. The gardens burst into life with flowers Imani had never seen before, and the days grew longer and warmer. It had been 3 months since she left the Warrens, 3 months since she started building a real life. The rhythm of working with Brandon had become second nature. They moved through their days in comfortable synchronicity, anticipating each other's needs and preferences. Imani had become indispensable, not just as an assistant but as a trusted advisor. Brandon asked her opinion on business decisions, valued her perspective on difficult situations, and treated her insights with genuine respect. But something else was changing too, something neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. It started with small things. The way Brandon's face lit up when Imani entered the office each morning. The way Imani found excuses to work late when Brandon was working late. The casual touches that lingered just a moment too long. The laughter that came easier and more frequent. One evening, working late on a major presentation, Brandon leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "I need a break," he announced. "Want to take a walk? The garden is beautiful this time of evening." They walked through the paths in comfortable silence, the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Finally, Brandon spoke. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever think about what comes next? After this year is up, I mean. Your contract ends in 9 months. Imani's heart clenched. She had been trying not to think about that. Sometimes, she admitted, I've been saving money. I could go back to school maybe, or start something of my own. Would you want to stay? Brandon asked quietly. Renew the contract, I mean. You've been the best assistant I've ever had. I'd hate to lose you. The question was professional, but something in his tone suggested he was asking about more than just work. I'd like that, Imani said carefully. I've been happy here. Happier than I've ever been. They stopped walking, facing each other in the fading light. Brandon looked like he wanted to say something more, but instead he just smiled. Good. I'm glad to hear it. They continued walking, but the air between them felt charged with unspoken words. Later that week, Jerome came by the office with his wife Tanya and their 2 children. The kids, 8 and 10, ran through the house with the easy comfort of frequent visitors. Watching Brandon interact with them, patient and playful, Imani felt something shift in her chest. Uncle Brandon, come see what I built, the youngest, a girl named Sophia, demanded, dragging him toward where she had set up blocks in the living room. Brandon went willingly, settling on the floor in his expensive suit to admire her creation. The sight made Imani smile. He's good with them, Tanya said, coming to stand beside Imani. She wore a cheerful green sundress. He and Michelle talked about having kids. I think it would have happened if she hadn't gotten sick. He doesn't talk much about her, Imani said softly. He's talked more since you came, Tanya replied. The first year after Michelle died, Brandon barely spoke at all. Just worked himself into the ground. The second year was a little better, but he was still just going through the motions. Then you showed up, and for the first time in 3 years I've seen him actually smile again. Actually laugh. We're just colleagues, Imani protested weakly. Tanya gave her a knowing look. Honey, I've known Brandon for 15 years. I know what just colleagues looks like on him. This isn't it. Before Imani could respond, Jerome called out. Tanya, we should head out. School night and all. As they gathered the children and prepared to leave, Sophia ran up to Imani and hugged her legs. You're pretty, she announced with childish certainty. Uncle Brandon likes you. Sophia, Jerome laughed, scooping her up. Let's not embarrass the adults. But Sophia's words lingered after they left. Did Brandon like her? More importantly, how did she feel about him? The answer came to her slowly over the following weeks. She realized she had stopped thinking of this as temporary. She woke up each morning excited to see Brandon, to work beside him, to share meals and conversations. She memorized his coffee order, his favorite foods, the small things that made him smile. She found herself noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he ran his fingers through his hair when he was thinking hard about something. She was falling for him. The realization terrified her. Brandon was her boss, her savior, the person who had pulled her out of the worst situation of her life. How could she possibly tell him she wanted more than friendship and professional respect? One evening they were working late again, the office lit only by desk lamps. Brandon had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, and Imani found herself distracted by the casual intimacy of it. Hearth to Imani, Brandon said with amusement. I've said your name 3 times. Sorry, Imani felt her face heat. What were you saying? Brandon set down the document he'd been reviewing. Actually, I wanted to tell you something. About Michelle. Imani's attention snapped fully to him. In 3 months he had barely mentioned his late wife. I met her in college, Brandon began, his voice soft. She was studying art history and I was in business school. She was everything I wasn't, creative, free-spirited, constantly seeing beauty in things I overlooked. She balanced me. Made me better. She sounds wonderful, Imani said gently. She was. When she got sick, pancreatic cancer, it was fast. 6 months from diagnosis too. He trailed off. I watched her fade and I couldn't do anything to stop it. All my money, all my resources, and I couldn't save the one person who mattered most. I'm so sorry, Brandon. For a long time I felt guilty being alive when she wasn't. Guilty for wanting to move forward like I was betraying her memory. I shut down everything except work because work didn't hurt. What changed? Imani asked. Brandon looked directly at her, his eyes intense in the lamplight. You did. Having you here, working with you, getting to know you, it reminded me that life doesn't stop. That there's still joy to be found, still connections to make. Michelle wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. She would have wanted me to find happiness again. Do you think she'd be happy with the person you've become? I think she'd be relieved I'm finally trying again. Brandon paused. Imani, I need you to know something. What started as me helping you has become something more. You've become important to me. Not just as an employee but as a friend. As someone whose presence makes my life better. Imani's heart raced. You've made my life better too. Given me more than I ever thought I deserved. You deserve everything good, Brandon said firmly. Never doubt that. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Imani wanted to close the distance, to tell him everything she'd been feeling. But fear held her back. What if she was misreading things? What if this was just friendship and her confession ruined everything? We should probably call it a night, Brandon said finally, breaking the spell. It's almost midnight. They walked out together, and at the fork in the path where Brandon turned toward the main house and Imani toward the guest house, they hesitated. Good night, Imani, Brandon said softly. Good night, Brandon. Imani walked to the guest house with her mind spinning. Something was building between them, something real and powerful and terrifying. But the gap between friendship and something more seemed impossibly wide, filled with questions of propriety and power dynamics and fear. That night, lying in bed, Imani made a decision. She would be patient. She would let things develop naturally. And when the time was right, when they were both ready, she would find the courage to tell him the truth. That she wasn't just grateful to him. She was in love with him. The question was whether he felt the same way. And if he did, would he allow himself to admit it? Or would the memory of his late wife and the complexity of their situation keep them forever circling each other, never quite closing the distance? Only time would tell. But Imani was learning to trust in possibilities, to believe that good things could happen to her. And the possibility of love, real, honest, mutual love, was the best thing she could imagine. Absolutely not, Brandon said, his voice unusually firm. You're coming with me and that's final. Imani looked up from her desk where she'd been preparing materials for an upcoming board meeting. Brandon stood with his arms crossed, an expression of stubborn determination on his face. Brandon, I'm your assistant, not your date. It would be inappropriate for me to attend the gala as your guest. You're my colleague and I need someone there I can actually talk to without pretending to care about their golf handicap. Besides, Jerome and Tanya are going. It won't be weird. The Parker Foundation Charity Gala was the social event of the season, bringing together the city's wealthiest to raise money for children's education. Brandon had been invited as a major donor, and Imani had been perfectly content to stay home. I don't even have anything appropriate to wear, she protested weakly. That's easily solved. Brandon pulled out his phone and made a call. Yes, this is Brandon Pierce. I need a personal shopper sent to my estate this afternoon. For formal evening wear. Measurements needed. Yes, the full service. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Imani with satisfaction. Problem solved. Brandon, you can't just. I can and I did. Imani, please. I don't want to go to this thing alone, pretending to enjoy small talk with people I barely know. I want someone there who makes the evening bearable. That's you. The way he said it, raw and honest, made Imani's resolve crumble. Okay, she agreed softly. I'll go. That afternoon, a personal shopper arrived with racks of evening gowns. The woman, a stylish professional named Grace, had Imani try on dress after dress until they found the perfect one. It was a maroon gown, elegant and sophisticated without being flashy. The neckline was modest but flattering, and the way the fabric draped made Imani feel beautiful in a way she never had before. That's the one, Grace said with satisfaction. You look stunning. Looking at herself in the mirror, Imani barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress transformed her from assistant to equal, from background player to someone who belonged at a billionaire's side. On the night of the gala, Imani spent extra time getting ready. She styled her hair in elegant twists, applied makeup with a careful hand, and when she slipped into the maroon gown, she felt like a different person. Brandon was waiting outside the guest house when she emerged. He wore a classic black tuxedo, looking every inch the successful billionaire. But when he saw Imani, his expression shifted to something that made her breath catch. You look incredible, he said, his voice rough around the edges. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. In the car, Imani's nerves increased. What if I say the wrong thing? What if people ask about me and I don't know how to explain our situation? Tell them the truth. You're my personal assistant and a friend. Anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me. Brandon's confidence was reassuring. Imani, you belong there just as much as anyone else. More than most actually, since you earned your place rather than inheriting it. The gala was held at the city's premier art museum, transformed for the evening into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Waiters circulated with champagne and appetizers. Everywhere Imani looked, she saw wealth and power dressed in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos. Overwhelmed? Brandon asked quietly as they entered. A little, Imani admitted. Good. That means you're paying attention. Half the people here are so used to this they don't even see it anymore. He placed a gentle hand on her lower back. Stay close to me. We'll make the rounds, then find Jerome and Tanya and actually enjoy ourselves. They moved through the crowd, Brandon introducing Imani to various business associates and donors. She noticed how people's eyes lingered on her, curious and assessing. Some faces showed subtle disapproval, others showed interest. She held her head high and matched their gazes with quiet confidence. Brandon, darling, a sharp voice cut through the conversations. A woman in a sleek blue gown approached, her smile not reaching her cold eyes. So glad you could make it. Nicole? Brandon's voice cooled noticeably. How are you? Wonderful as always. And who is this? Nicole's gaze raked over Imani with barely concealed disdain. This is Imani Colbert, my personal assistant. How modern of you bringing staff to social events. Nicole's tone was poisonous sugar. Tell me, dear, how does one become a personal assistant to someone like Brandon? I imagine the qualifications are quite specific. The insinuation was clear and ugly. Imani felt her face heat, but before she could respond, Brandon stepped forward. The qualifications include intelligence, competence, integrity, and the ability to tolerate people like you, Nicole. His voice was ice. Imani has all of those in abundance. She's also someone I respect deeply, which is more than I can say for most people in this room. Nicole's smile faltered. I was just making conversation. No, you were being deliberately insulting to someone who has done nothing to you. That seems to be your specialty. Brandon's cold fury was impressive. If you'll excuse us, we have actual conversations to attend to. He guided Imani away, his hand warm and protective on her back. Once they were out of earshot, Imani let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry, Brandon said. Nicole Hartman is a rival businesswoman who's been trying to undermine me for years. She saw you as an opportunity to needle me. Is that what people think? That I'm sleeping with you for money or position? Some might. Anyone who matters knows better. Brandon stopped and turned to face her fully. Imani, look at me. You are brilliant, capable, and deserve to be here. Anyone who suggests otherwise is revealing their own insecurities and prejudices. Don't let them diminish you. The fierce protectiveness in his eyes made Imani's heart soar. Thank you, she whispered. Always. They found Jerome and Tanya at the bar, and the evening improved dramatically. The four of them claimed a table and spent the night actually enjoying themselves, laughing at inside jokes and ignoring the stuffy atmosphere. But Imani noticed how Brandon kept finding excuses to touch her. A hand on her arm when making a point. Fingers brushing hers when passing a drink. The way he leaned in close to speak over the music, his breath warm against her ear. It felt like more than friendship. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had quite admitted yet. When the dancing started, Brandon held out his hand. Would you like to dance? Imani's heart hammered, but she placed her hand in his. I'd love to. On the dance floor, Brandon pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together naturally, and Imani was hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched. Thank you for coming tonight, Brandon said quietly. I know I strong-armed you into it, but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad too, Imani admitted. Even with people like Nicole. People like Nicole don't matter. What matters is... He paused, searching her face. What matters is finding people who see you for who you really are. Who value you properly. Do you? The question slipped out before Imani could stop it. Value me properly? Brandon's arms tightened around her. More than I probably should, he said, his voice low and intense. The confession hung between them, weighted with possibility. Imani's breath caught. This was it. The moment where everything could change. But then the song ended and people began applauding and the moment fractured. Brandon stepped back, his expression guarded again. We should probably head out, he said. Early meeting tomorrow. In the car ride home they sat in charged silence. Imani's mind replayed Brandon's words over and over. More than I probably should. What did that mean? Was it acknowledgement of feelings or regret for having them? At the estate, Brandon walked her to the guest house door. They stood facing each other in the soft glow of the porch light. Tonight was. Brandon started, then stopped. Imani, I need you to know something. You've become incredibly important to me. But our situation is complicated. The power dynamic, the fact that I'm your employer, everything you've been through. I don't want to take advantage or make you feel obligated in any way. What if I don't feel obligated? Imani asked, finding courage she didn't know she had. What if I just feel? Brandon's eyes darkened. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Then we need to be very careful. Because what I feel is significant. And scary. And completely inappropriate given our arrangement. Life is complicated, Imani said softly. But that doesn't mean the feelings aren't real. No, Brandon agreed. It doesn't. They stood there, suspended in possibility, neither quite brave enough to close the final distance. Finally, Brandon stepped back. Good night, Imani. Thank you for tonight. Good night, Brandon. Imani went inside and leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. Something had shifted tonight. They had both acknowledged, however indirectly, that this was more than just a professional relationship. The question now was what they were going to do about it. The week after the gala passed in a state of heightened tension. Brandon and Imani continued working together, but there was a new awareness between them, a careful distance that felt like holding their breath. Imani caught Brandon watching her sometimes, his expression unreadable. She knew she did the same, her eyes drawn to him constantly. The air between them felt electric, charged with words they weren't saying. Jerome noticed. Okay, what's going on? He asked Imani one afternoon when Brandon was on a phone call. The tension in this office is thick enough to cut. I don't know what you mean, Imani said, not meeting his eyes. Please. I've known Brandon for 18 years. I can tell when something's bothering him. And you've been walking around like you're afraid to breathe wrong. Jerome's voice was gentle. Did something happen at the gala? Imani bit her lip. I think we both realized we feel more than we should. And now we don't know what to do about it. Jerome sighed. I was wondering when you two would figure that out. You've been circling each other for months. It's complicated. I work for him. I owe him everything. How can I separate what I feel from gratitude? Can I give you some advice? Jerome asked. Stop overthinking it. Yes, Brandon helped you out of a bad situation. But you've also been an amazing assistant who's made his life better. You don't owe him romantic feelings. If you have them, it's because of who he is, not what he did for you. What if I'm reading it wrong? What if he just sees me as a responsibility? Trust me, what Brandon feels for you is not responsibility. That man has been half in love with you since the gala, maybe before. But he's scared. Jerome's voice dropped. Michelle was his world. When she died, it broke something in him. The idea of loving someone again, of opening himself up to that kind of loss, it terrifies him. So what do I do? Be patient. Be honest. And when the moment is right, be brave enough to say what you feel. Jerome smiled. Brandon's worth the risk. And I think you are too. Later that evening, Imani was finishing up some emails when she heard voices from Brandon's office. The door was slightly ajar and she recognized Jerome's voice. You need to tell her, Jerome was saying. It's not that simple. Brandon sounded tired. She works for me, Jerome. The power dynamic alone makes this ethically questionable. And beyond that, what kind of man uses someone's vulnerability as an opening for romance? The kind who genuinely cares about her well-being? Brandon, you didn't pursue Imani when she was vulnerable. You gave her space, resources, and respect. You've spent months proving you see her as an equal. That's not exploitation. But I'm still her employer. She depends on me for housing, income, everything. How can she say no if I ask for more? How can I ever be sure her feelings are real and not just gratitude or obligation? Imani's heart clenched. So Brandon did feel something, but his conscience was holding him back. Have you considered just talking to her about it? Jerome asked. Laying out your concerns and seeing what she says? I'm terrified of losing what we have. Our friendship, our working relationship, everything. If I confess how I feel and she doesn't feel the same or worse, feels pressure to reciprocate, it ruins everything. And if she does feel the same? If you're both holding back out of fear and missing out on something real? Silence fell. Imani knew she should walk away, stop eavesdropping. But she couldn't move. I care about her so much, Jerome, Brandon said, his voice rough with emotion. More than I've cared about anyone since Michelle. She's smart and kind and she sees the world in ways that make me want to be better. When she smiles at something I've said, it's the best part of my day. And the thought of not having her in my life in any capacity is unbearable. That sounds like love, my friend. Maybe it is. But that doesn't make it right or simple. Imani deserves someone who can give themselves to her completely, without baggage or complications. Someone who doesn't carry the ghost of another love. Someone who won't always wonder if they're taking advantage. Michelle wouldn't want you to stop living. You know that. I know. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your heart are different things. I'm not sure I know how to love someone new without feeling guilty, like I'm betraying her memory. Imani's eyes filled with tears. Brandon was struggling with the same things she was, feeling the same fears and doubts. You're not betraying anyone by allowing yourself to be happy again, Jerome said firmly. Michelle loved you. She would want you to find joy, to find love. Holding yourself back doesn't honor her memory. It just makes both of you suffer for nothing. When did you get so wise? Brandon asked with a weak laugh. Years of watching my best friend torture himself unnecessarily. Jerome's voice was affectionate. Talk to Imani. Trust her with the truth. You might be surprised by what you hear. Imani quietly backed away from the door and returned to her desk, her mind spinning. Brandon cared for her. Really cared. But he was holding back because he didn't want to take advantage, because he was afraid of betraying his late wife's memory, because he questioned whether her feelings could be real given their situation. She understood all of those concerns. They were the same ones keeping her awake at night. But hearing him voice them, hearing the pain and longing in his voice, made her realize something important. They were both suffering because they were both trying to be noble. They were both denying their feelings to protect the other person. And in doing so they were both miserable. Something had to change. Someone had to be brave enough to break the stalemate. And Imani decided, with sudden clarity, that it would be her. She had spent her entire life letting other people dictate her worth, her choices, her future. The Warrens had taught her to be small, to not ask for what she wanted, to accept whatever scraps were offered. But Brandon had taught her something different. He had taught her that she had value, that her voice mattered, that she deserved to take up space in the world. And if he wouldn't be brave enough to say what he felt because he was trying to protect her, then she would be brave enough for both of them. She would tell him the truth. She would lay out her feelings honestly without apology or shame. And then they would figure out together what came next. The decision filled her with equal parts terror and determination. But for the first time in months, Imani felt like she was taking control of her own destiny. Tomorrow she would change everything. Tomorrow she would tell Brandon Pierce that she loved him. And whatever happened after that, at least she would know she tried. Do you think Imani should tell Brandon how she feels, or is the situation too complicated? Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to see what happens next. Will love win or will fear keep them apart? Don't miss the next chapter. Brandon was gone when Imani arrived at the office the next morning. A note on his desk simply read, "Emergency board meeting. Back by afternoon. B." Imani tried to focus on work, but her mind kept rehearsing what she would say. I care about you. I have feelings for you. I think we could be something together. Every version sounded either too casual or too intense. By the time Brandon returned at 3 in the afternoon, Imani's nerves were frayed. Hey, he said, dropping his briefcase by his desk. He looked tired, but his face lit up when he saw her. Miss me? Always, Imani said, then felt her face heat at how that sounded. Brandon's expression shifted, something warm and intense passing through his eyes. Imani, can we talk? I have something I need to show you. Actually, I need to talk to you too, Imani said. Her heart hammered. This was it. Can I go first? Of course. But before she could speak, Brandon's phone rang. He glanced at it and grimaced. I have to take this. Major investor. Give me 15 minutes? Sure, Imani said, deflating slightly. 15 minutes turned into an hour as one call led to another urgent matter. By the time Brandon was free, it was after 5, and Mrs. Chen had left dinner in warming trays. I'm so sorry, Brandon said, looking genuinely distressed. This day has been chaos. But Imani, what I wanted to show you is important. Can we go to the guest house? I have something waiting there. Confused but curious, Imani followed him across the estate. At the guest house, Brandon pushed open the door and gestured inside. The living room had been transformed. On the coffee table sat stacks of documents, a laptop and several folders. But it was the banner hanging across the back wall that caught Imani's attention. New Beginnings Foundation, she read aloud, then looked at Brandon in confusion. It's yours, Brandon said softly. Or it will be if you want it. He gestured to the materials on the table. I've been working on this for weeks. A non-profit organization focused on supporting adopted children and foster youth. Providing resources for education, counseling, housing assistance, mentorship programs. Everything you didn't have growing up. Imani stared at him, speechless. You mentioned once that you wished there was more support for kids in the system, Brandon continued. That if you ever had the resources you'd want to help them. So I thought, why wait? The foundation is fully funded, $5 million to start. I've handled all the legal setup, the board of directors, everything. It's ready to launch. And it's yours to run. Mine? Imani whispered. Completely. Your name is on all the paperwork. You'll be the founder and executive director. You'll make all the decisions about how the money is spent, what programs to develop, everything. I'm just the donor. You're the visionary. Imani picked up one of the folders with shaking hands. Inside was a complete business plan, articles of incorporation with her name listed as founder, even mock-ups for a website. Brandon, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not enough, Brandon said firmly. And here's the important part. This is yours regardless of whether you stay working for me. The foundation is independent. You can run it from here or you can rent office space downtown. You can keep working as my assistant or you can focus solely on the foundation. The choice is entirely yours. The implications crashed over Imani. Brandon was giving her complete financial and professional independence. He was removing any power imbalance between them. Why? She asked, though she thought she knew. Brandon took a deep breath. Because I need you to know you have choices. Because our relationship, whatever it is, can't be complicated by you feeling dependent on me or obligated to me. I want you in my life, Imani, but only if you choose to be there freely. Not because I'm your employer or your benefactor, but because you want to be. What are you saying? Imani's heart was racing. I'm saying that I care about you. More than care. I have feelings for you that go way beyond professional respect or friendship. But I can't act on those feelings as long as you work for me, as long as there's any question about whether you can truly choose freely. Brandon's voice was intense, his eyes locked on hers. So I'm giving you this. Real independence. Real choice. And then, if you want, when you're ready, we can figure out what comes next between us as equals. Tears streamed down Imani's face. You do all this just to remove the power imbalance? I'd do anything to make sure you know you're free. That you have value and power and choices. That whatever you feel for me, if you feel anything, is real and not influenced by gratitude or dependence. Brandon's voice cracked slightly. I love you, Imani. I've been in love with you for months. But I can't be with you, I won't be with you, until I know for certain that you're with me because you want to be, not because you feel you have to be. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and beautiful. You love me? Imani whispered. Yes. So much it terrifies me. But I needed you to know you have power here. That you don't owe me anything. That this foundation is yours regardless of what you feel or what you choose. Imani set down the folder and crossed the room to stand directly in front of Brandon. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, making him look directly at her. I was going to tell you today that I love you too, she said clearly. Before you showed me all this. Before you gave me any foundation or independence. I've been in love with you for months, and it had nothing to do with gratitude or obligation. Just because of who you are. Because you're kind and thoughtful and you see me as a person, not a possession. Because you make me laugh and challenge me to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm home. Brandon's eyes widened. Imani. I know our situation is complicated. I know there are power dynamics and questions about whether my feelings are real. But they are real, Brandon. What I feel for you has nothing to do with your money or what you've done for me. It's about who you are as a person. The man who takes time to thank his staff. Who talks to his friends' children with genuine interest. Who carries grief with grace. Who built an entire foundation just to make sure I knew I had choices. Are you sure? Brandon's voice was rough. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. I need you to be absolutely certain. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Imani's voice was steady and clear. I love you, Brandon Pierce. Not because you saved me, but because you showed me who I could be. And I choose you. Freely, completely, without reservation. I choose you. Brandon pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I love you, he whispered against her hair. So much. You have no idea how long I've wanted to say that. I think I have some idea, Imani said, pulling back to look at him. I heard you talking to Jerome yesterday. About being afraid to love again, about feeling like you'd be betraying Michelle's memory. You heard that? Brandon looked embarrassed. Every word. And I need you to know something. Loving me doesn't betray Michelle. Love isn't a finite resource. You can honor her memory and still allow yourself to be happy. In fact, I think that's exactly what she would want for you. Brandon's eyes glistened with tears. Jerome said something similar. Smart man. You should listen to him more often. They stood there wrapped in each other's arms, finally allowing themselves to feel everything they'd been holding back. So what happens now? Imani asked. Now we take it slow. We figure this out together. You launch your foundation and I support you from wherever you want me, closer with space. We date properly like normal people. No employer-employee complications, just two people who care about each other learning what they could be together. I like the sound of that, Imani said. Though I should probably tell you I want to keep working for you too. I love the work we do together. Are you sure? It might be complicated. Everything worth having is complicated, Imani said. We'll figure it out. Brandon smiled and leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. Can I kiss you? He asked softly. I thought you'd never ask. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative and sweet. But then it deepened, weeks of denied attraction and suppressed feelings pouring into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Wow, Imani said. Yeah, Brandon agreed. Wow. They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, talking and kissing and planning the future. Brandon walked Imani through all the foundation documents, genuinely excited about the work she could do. Imani asked questions and made notes, her mind already spinning with possibilities. We should celebrate, Brandon said as the evening grew late. Officially. Tell Jerome and Tanya, make it real. I'd like that, Imani agreed. But right now, can we just sit here? Just be together? There's nowhere I'd rather be. They sat curled together on the couch, the foundation documents spread around them, and Imani felt a peace she had never known. She was loved. She was valued. She had purpose and power and choices. And she had found a partner who respected her enough to give her all of that before asking for anything in return. It was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. Not the foundation or the money or the independence, though those were incredible. But the trust. The belief in her worth. The willingness to love her as an equal, not a dependent. For the first time in her life, Imani Colbert felt truly free. And that freedom tasted like joy. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Brandon and Imani officially changed her role from assistant to foundation director, though she continued to help him with certain projects because she enjoyed the work. They went on actual dates, dinners at quiet restaurants, walks in the park, normal things that made them feel like a real couple. Jerome and Tanya were thrilled when they shared the news, though Tanya admitted she'd been waiting for months for them to figure it out. You two were so obvious, she said laughing. The way you looked at each other, it was like watching a romance movie. The foundation work energized Imani in ways she hadn't expected. She began developing programs, reaching out to foster care agencies, building relationships with social workers and advocates. Brandon supported her fully but let her lead, respecting her vision. One evening they were sitting in the garden of the main house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and purple. Brandon had cooked dinner, something he did when he wanted to impress, and they'd eaten on the patio. I've been thinking, Brandon said, playing with Imani's fingers. About us, about the future. Oh. Imani's heart skipped. They'd been together officially for 2 months, but it felt like longer, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait longer. But I can't stop thinking about it. Brandon turned to face her fully. I want you to move into the main house. Not as staff but as my partner. I want to wake up next to you. I want to share meals and evenings and life with you, not separated by a stone path and separate buildings. Brandon, Imani started, but he held up a hand. I know what you're going to say. That it's too soon, that we should take it slow. And if you need more time, I'll wait. But Imani, I've already wasted 3 years barely living. I don't want to waste any more time pretending I don't know exactly what I want. And what I want is you. In my home, in my life, permanently. Imani felt tears prick her eyes. I want that too, she admitted. I've wanted it for weeks but was afraid to say so. I thought you'd think I was moving too fast, or that I wanted you for your money, or that you're still that girl the Warrens tried to trade? Brandon asked gently. Imani, you need to let that go. You're not that person anymore. You're a successful foundation director, a brilliant woman with a bright future, and someone I'm incredibly lucky to have in my life. You're my equal in every way that matters. I'm working on believing that, Imani said. You've helped me see myself differently. Like I have worth beyond what I can do for others. You have infinite worth, Brandon said firmly. And I plan to spend however long you'll let me reminding you of that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, then Brandon spoke again. There's something else I want to tell you. About Michelle. You don't have to, Imani said quickly. I want to. I need you to understand. Brandon took a deep breath. For a long time after Michelle died, I felt guilty whenever I was happy. Like I was betraying her memory by moving forward. But lately, I've started thinking about it differently. Michelle loved life. She found joy in everything. And I think she would be furious with me for wasting 3 years being miserable, for denying myself happiness because she couldn't be here to share it. I think you're right, Imani said softly. Loving you doesn't mean I love her less. It means I'm finally allowing myself to live again. And I think wherever she is, Michelle would be happy about that. She'd probably like you actually. You both see beauty in things others overlook. You both believe in helping people and making the world better. Imani's heart swelled. Thank you for sharing that with me. And for being patient with yourself, with us. I should be thanking you. You gave me a reason to try again. Brandon pulled her closer. So what do you say? Will you move in with me? Make this house actually feel like a home again. Imani pretended to think about it, then smiled. Yes. Absolutely yes. Brandon's answering smile was brilliant. He pulled her into a kiss that communicated everything words couldn't, love and hope and promise. When they pulled apart, Imani felt a completeness she'd never known. Everything in her life had led to this moment, all the pain and struggle and loneliness had brought her here, to this man, this love, this future. I love you, she said, simple and true. I love you too, Brandon replied. More than I thought I could love anyone again. You've given me back my life, Imani. You've reminded me how to be human, how to feel, how to hope. That's a gift beyond measure. We've given each other something, Imani corrected. You saved me, but I think maybe I saved you too. Maybe we saved each other, Brandon agreed. They stayed in the garden until the stars came out, talking about the future, making plans, dreaming out loud. Imani felt drunk on possibility, on the certainty that this was real and lasting and right. Later that night, as she packed her things in the guest house for the move to the main house, Imani reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. She had gone from being offered as a joke in a business deal to being a foundation director and the partner of a man who valued her beyond measure. She looked at the space that had been her first real home, the place where she'd learned she could be safe and valued. It would always be special to her. But now it was time to move forward, to build a life with Brandon, to continue becoming the person she was meant to be. The next day, with Jerome and Tanya's help, Imani moved her belongings into the main house. Brandon had cleared space in his closet, emptied drawers, and even moved some of Michelle's photos to his office to make room for new memories. I'll always carry her with me, he explained to Imani. But this house needs to reflect our life together now, not the past. It was one more proof of Brandon's commitment, his willingness to make space for Imani not just physically but emotionally. That night, they had their first dinner in the main house as partners, not employer and employee, not benefactor and recipient, but equals who had chosen each other freely and completely. To new beginnings, Brandon toasted, raising his wine glass. To love that finds you when you least expect it, Imani added. To finding home in another person, Jerome added. He and Tanya had joined them for the celebration. They drank and laughed and planned the future. Imani talked excitedly about the foundation's first programs. Brandon shared news about a new business venture. Jerome and Tanya told stories about their kids. It felt like family. Real family, built on choice and love rather than obligation or blood. Later, lying in bed next to Brandon for the first time, Imani felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. What are you thinking? Brandon asked, pulling her closer. That I'm happy, Imani said simply. Really truly happy. I didn't know I could feel this way. Get used to it, Brandon murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Because I plan to make you this happy for as long as you'll let me. Forever sounds good, Imani replied. Forever it is. They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found their way home through pain and struggle and unexpected grace. And in that moment, with Brandon's heartbeat steady beneath her ear and his arms secure around her, Imani knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The journey from being offered as a joke to being cherished as a partner had been long and difficult. But every step had been worth it to end up here, loved and valued and free. And as sleep claimed her, Imani smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring more joy, more growth, more life shared with the man who had seen her worth when no one else did. The man who had loved her not despite her past, but because of the strength that past had forged in her. The greatest gift, she realized, wasn't the money or the foundation or even the security. It was being seen, being known, being loved for exactly who she was. And that was worth everything. 6 months later, Imani stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the cream-colored wedding dress. It was simple and elegant, nothing like the elaborate gowns she'd seen in magazines. But it was perfect for who she was and what this day meant. "You look beautiful," Tanya said from behind her. She wore a deep green dress serving as Imani's maid of honor. "Brandon's not going to be able to breathe when he sees you." "I still can't believe this is happening," Imani admitted. "6 months ago I was terrified to even tell him how I felt. And now you're marrying him," Tanya finished with a smile. "It's amazing how life can change when you're brave enough to reach for what you want." The foundation had thrived over the past months. Imani had launched 3 programs supporting foster youth, partnering with local agencies to provide resources the system couldn't. She'd hired a small staff and was already making a real difference in children's lives. The work was fulfilling in ways she'd never imagined, knowing she was preventing other kids from feeling the way she had felt, alone and unwanted. But even more incredible was the relationship she'd built with Brandon. They had taken their time, learning each other's rhythms and quirks and wounds. They'd had difficult conversations about money and power and making sure their partnership stayed balanced. They'd laughed and argued and made up. They'd built a real relationship based on mutual respect and genuine love. 3 months ago Brandon had proposed. Not with grand gestures or public displays, but quietly over breakfast, telling Imani that every morning with her was better than he thought his life could be again, and he wanted every morning for the rest of his life. Imani had said yes without hesitation. Now, she stood ready to marry him in a small ceremony in the garden where they'd first walked together, where he'd first made the offer that changed her life. "Ready?" Tanya asked. "So ready," Imani replied. They walked out together. The garden had been transformed with simple decorations, white chairs arranged in rows, flowers everywhere. But the most striking thing was the intimacy. This wasn't a society wedding designed to impress. It was personal and real. Jerome's children served as flower girl and ring bearer, excited to be part of the event. Mrs. Chin sat in the front row, having become a grandmother figure to Imani. A few other close friends filled the remaining seats. That was all. No distant relatives, no business associates, no one they didn't truly care about. And at the end of the aisle stood Brandon, looking handsome in a simple dark suit with a blue tie. But it was his expression when he saw Imani that made her heart soar. Pure love and joy and wonder, like he couldn't quite believe his luck. Jerome stood beside Brandon as best man, grinning. As Imani walked down the aisle alone, by choice, she met Brandon's eyes and smiled. This was her choice. Her future. Her family. The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, wanting words that were truly theirs. Brandon went first, taking Imani's hands. "Imani, 6 months ago you walked into my life during one of the strangest situations imaginable. But from that first conversation I saw something in you that I recognized. Strength, grace, and a fundamental goodness that no amount of mistreatment could destroy. You've taught me that it's okay to live again, to love again, to hope again. You've shown me that love doesn't diminish when shared, it multiplies. I promise to always see you as the incredible person you are. To support your dreams while pursuing my own. To build a life with you that honors both who we've been and who we're becoming. You are not the greatest gift I was offered. You are the greatest gift life could have given me. And I will spend the rest of my days being worthy of that gift." Imani's eyes filled with tears. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath. "Brandon, you once told me that love isn't a finite resource. I've learned that's true. Loving you doesn't diminish me or make me less, it expands me and makes me more. You gave me freedom when I needed it most, but the greatest freedom you gave me was the freedom to choose you, freely and completely. You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You treated me with respect when others treated me as disposable. You built me up without tearing me down. I promise to honor your past while building our future. To support you through grief and joy alike. To be your partner, your equal, your home. You saved me, but then you let me save myself. That's the most powerful love I've ever known. And I choose you today and every day after." There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering as they exchanged rings, simple bands that represented the simplicity and strength of what they'd built together. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said. "You may kiss." Brandon pulled Imani close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of their small audience. When they broke apart, both were grinning. "Hello, Mrs. Pierce," Brandon whispered. "Hello, Mr. Pierce," Imani replied. "Ready to start forever? With you?" "Absolutely." The reception was held in the main house, casual and joyful. There was good food and better conversation. Jerome's kids ran around the garden, their laughter filling the air. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears and told everyone who would listen about how Brandon had needed this, how Imani had brought life back to the house. As the sun began to set, Brandon and Imani had their first dance as a married couple on the patio. The music was soft, a song Brandon had chosen because Imani had hummed it once while working. Happy? Brandon asked as they swayed together. Deliriously, Imani confirmed. Although I keep waiting to wake up and find this was all a dream. It's real, Brandon assured her. Every impossible, beautiful, perfect bit of it. Do you ever think about how this started? With the Warrens trying to trade me like property? Sometimes. But only to be grateful it happened. If they hadn't made that terrible joke, I might never have met you. I'm grateful too, Imani admitted. Even though it was awful, it led me here. Sometimes I think about going back and telling that scared girl in the Warren house that everything would work out. That the joke would become the best thing that ever happened to her. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Brandon said seriously. Never doubt that. Later, when the celebration was winding down and guests were leaving, Jerome pulled Brandon aside while Tanya hugged Imani. You did good, man, Jerome said. Michelle would be proud of you. Of both of you. Thanks, Jerome. For everything. For being there through the dark years, for encouraging me to try again, for being the best friend a guy could ask for. Always. Now go be with your wife. Enjoy this happiness. You've both earned it. As night fell, Imani and Brandon stood in the garden where everything had begun. The fairy lights strung through the trees twinkled like stars, and the air was warm and perfect. What are you thinking? Brandon asked, pulling Imani close. I'm thinking about all the kids out there who feel like I felt. Alone, unwanted, disposable. And I'm thinking about how the foundation can reach more of them, help more of them. Give them the chances I was given. Always thinking of others, Brandon said fondly. That's one of the 1,000 reasons I love you. I can't help it. I know what it's like to believe you have no value. I want every kid to know they matter, that they're worthy of love and respect and good things. We'll make it happen, Brandon promised. Together. They stood there in comfortable silence, two people who had found their way to each other through an unlikely path. A business deal meant as a joke had become a love story. A moment of cruelty had transformed into an opportunity for grace. Thank you, Imani said softly. For what? For seeing me. For valuing me. For giving me the freedom to choose this, to choose you. Thank you for choosing me, Brandon replied. For teaching me how to live again. For being patient with my fears and my grief. For loving me despite my baggage. We all have baggage, Imani said. The trick is finding someone willing to help you carry it. I'll carry yours if you carry mine, Brandon offered. Deal. They sealed the promise with a kiss, standing in the garden where their journey had begun. And as they walked back to the house together, hand in hand, husband and wife, Imani reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. She had been offered as a joke, treated as a commodity, valued less than furniture. But Brandon had seen past all that to the person underneath. He had given her freedom and independence and choice. And she had chosen love. The greatest gift in her life wasn't money or security or even freedom, though those were all precious. The greatest gift was being seen for who she truly was and loved because of it, not despite it. And as they entered their home together, ready to begin their life as partners, Imani knew with absolute certainty that every moment of pain and struggle had been worth it to end up here, with this man in this life, surrounded by love. She was home. Finally, completely, perfectly home. And the joke that had begun as cruelty had become a love story that would last a lifetime. Because kindness had won. Hope had prevailed. And love, as it always should, had led the way.